I don't think of Elvis like that because I know too many artists that are far greater than Elvis.
It wasn't just irony, it was the last roar of a lion. Before Ray Charles left this world in 2004, he didn't leave behind a love song, not a fortune, not even a farewell speech. Instead, he left behind a memory, a list. 10 names, 10 people who lit a fire in his chest. 10 symbols of everything he could never forgive about the music industry. This wasn't gossip. This wasn't rumor. This was Ray Charles pulling back the curtain on what he believed was fake, soulless, or stolen. And trust me, some of these names will make you rethink your childhood soundtrack. The first name on Ray Charles's list, Elvis Presley. Now, Ray never said Elvis had no talent. He didn't deny the man could move a crowd. But to Ray, Elvis wasn't a king. He was a mirror reflecting something much uglier. Think about it. In the 1950s, Ray Charles was grinding in smoky clubs. He was told he was too black for radio. He poured gospel fire into R&B and got doors slammed in his face. Then one day, a young white man from Tupelo stepped on stage. He danced like black performers. He sang with their rhythm. And suddenly, America called it revolutionary. Ray never forgot that shift. When the world crowned Elvis the king of rock and roll, it felt like a crown stolen from nameless voices who never got their shot. Elvis didn't steal, Ray once said, but they stole from us and put it in his hands. That's the wound that never healed. Elvis didn't have to do anything wrong. He just had the right look, the right timing, and the right skin color. And while millions adored Elvis, Ray could only hear what was missing. The sweat, the scars, the years of rejection. That's why when people asked Ray about Elvis, he didn't rant, he didn't scream, he just shook his head and whispered, "Don't ask me no more questions about Elvis." Because to Ray Charles, Elvis wasn't just a singer. He was the reminder of a system that lifted one man up by keeping another man down. The second name on Ray Charles's list? Pat Boone. Now, if Elvis was the king, Pat Boone was the choir boy. Clean cut. Polite perfect for TV in the 1950s. But here's the thing. Pat Boone became a star by re-singing black hits, stripped of the fire that made them dangerous. Think about Tutti Frutti. Little Richard sang it like his life was on the line. It was wild, untamed. Parents thought it was scandalous. Then Pat Boone stepped in. Same song, but polished, tamed, buttoned up. Suddenly it was safe for white living rooms, and that version, not Little Richard's, got blasted across radio stations nationwide. Ray Charles saw it happen over and over again. Fats, Domino, Little Richard, countless others, all pioneers. But when it came time to sell the records, their names vanished. Pat Boone's face was on the cover. Ray once said Boone sang like he was reading someone else's speech. Because that's exactly what it was. A performance without the pain that created it. One night in 1983, at an event honoring Black legends, Boone walked right up to Ray, offered his hand. Ray didn't shake it, didn't speak. He just looked past him, lifted his sunglasses, and turned away. When someone later asked why, Ray's answer cut like glass. "I don't know him. I just know his voice was played instead of my friend's." That's the thing. Ray didn't hate Pat Boone as a man. He hated the machine that used Boone's clean smile to erase the voices that mattered. Pat Boone didn't invent that system, but he benefited from it. And Ray Charles never forgave the silence it demanded. The next name, Michael Bolton. In the early 90s, Bolton was everywhere, belting out power ballads, winning Grammys, packing arenas. To the world, he was the king of heartbreak songs. To Ray Charles, he was something else entirely. Ray once whispered at a press event, almost to himself, That boy sings like he's wearing my skin. See, Ray wasn't angry at Bolton's voice. Bolton could sing, no doubt about it. What cut deep was how the system embraced him, while Ray, singing the same way decades earlier, was told he was too raw, too black, too emotional. In the 1950s, Ray was shut out of radio for exactly that style. But in the 1990s, Bolton sang with the same fire and was praised as a breath of fresh air. That contradiction, that was betrayal. Ray once asked in his notebook, after standing beside Bolton at an awards show, how do you inherit a life you never lived? Because for Ray, a voice wasn't just technique, it was scars. It was being denied airplay because of your skin. It was your mother crying when you went blind at 7 and still teaching you piano by touch. Bolton didn't live that. He just inherited the sound. And when Bolton performed Georgia on My Mind, Ray's signature song, people applauded like history was being reborn. Ray stayed silent, then quietly said, "He's singing the words, but he's not carrying the weight." That was the wound. Not Bolton's success, but the reminder that Ray's truth, his voice, his soul, was only celebrated when it came out of someone else's mouth. Ray didn't hate Michael Bolton. He hated what the applause around him meant. Because to Ray Charles, Michael Bolton wasn't just another singer. He was living proof that America loved the sound of soul, so long as it wasn't sung by the man who created it. Another name on Ray Charles' unforgivable list. Kenny G. Now, Kenny G wasn't a villain. He didn't insult Ray. He didn't steal from him. He just played the saxophone so smoothly, so perfectly, that millions adored him. But that's exactly what Ray hated. Jazz isn't background music, Ray once said. It's supposed to make you get up and live. And to him, Kenny G's sound wasn't living, it was sleeping. Picture it. Long hair, soft notes, flawless recordings. Kenny's songs poured into shopping malls, elevators, hotel dinners. It was everywhere. But it was safe. Too safe. Ray, who grew up in the fire of gospel and the chaos of nightclubs, couldn't accept that kind of jazz. To him, music was supposed to be gritty, scarred, unpredictable. It had to bleed a little. It had to hurt a little. When asked about Kenny G, Ray didn't even bother saying his name. He just joked, if Charlie Parker came back today and heard the radio, he'd throw his horn in the river. Everyone knew who he meant. The truth is, Kenny G's smooth jazz sold millions, but Ray saw it as a trick, a watered-down version of a revolution. Jazz without rebellion, soul without risk. He once told a friend, Kenny doesn't break any rules, he just makes everything easier. And that was the heartbreak, because Ray knew a whole generation was growing up thinking that was jazz, polished, painless, a lullaby instead of a lightning strike. For Ray Charles, Kenny G wasn't just a musician, he was a symbol, a reminder of how the industry can take something raw and sacred and smooth it until it's unrecognizable. Jazz was never meant to be perfect. It was meant to be alive, and in Ray's eyes, Kenny G's music was the sound of jazz falling asleep. Another surprising name on Ray Charles's list, Tina Marie. Now this one hurts, because Tina Marie, the Ivory Queen of Soul, wasn't a joke. She wasn't a copycat lounge singer. She was loved. Motown signed her. Rick James mentored her. The black community embraced her like family. So why did Ray still keep her at arm's length? It wasn't her voice. It wasn't her courage. It was something deeper, something missing. Ray once said in a quiet conversation, "She's got the pitch, but not the scars." See, to him, soul wasn't about hitting every note. It was about the tremor in your voice when you didn't know if the lights would stay on. It was the crack in a lyric that carried your mama's tears. It was imperfection that told the truth. Tina Marie had the polish, she had the power, but Ray didn't hear the broken edges. She sings like she's been trained, he said. But soul don't come from practice. It comes from pain. Now, this wasn't hate. Ray respected Tina's fight to break barriers in a world where white singers were often dismissed in black spaces. He admired that she earned love from the community. But admiration wasn't the same as acceptance, because to Ray, music had to be more than style. It had to be a confession, and while Tina Marie could echo the sound of soul, Ray felt she never truly carried the weight of it. That's why, in his eyes, she remained a voice behind the curtain. Talented, beautiful, respected, but still a shadow, not the fire itself. Not every clash was loud. Sometimes the quiet ones cut the deepest. George Harrison, a Beatle, a man Ray Charles admired. Ray covered Harrison's ballad, Something, but he didn't just sing it, he bled into it. He stretched the melody, poured his soul into the piano, turned the words into a confession. Audiences were floored. Critics called it one of the greatest covers ever recorded. Frank Sinatra even declared Ray's version the best love song he'd ever heard. But when someone asked George Harrison what he thought, his reply was ice cold. I liked the bridge, he said. The rest didn't feel right, not enough nuance. One sentence, no praise, no recognition, just distance. And to Ray, that single remark was devastating, because for Ray, music wasn't a game of nuance. It wasn't technique, it was flesh, it was scars, it was memory. And when someone he respected reduced that raw confession to a technical critique, it felt like being dismissed as a child, told he hadn't played the notes properly. Those close to him said he never performed the song again. He shut his notebook mid-sentence that day and never opened it back to that page. Ray once confided to a friend, I've played with people who couldn't hear at all, and they still felt it. George, he could hear everything and still felt nothing. Harrison probably never meant to wound him, but Ray never forgot. Because when you live inside the music, a casual judgment isn't casual, it's a dagger. That's why George Harrison, calm, admired, untouchable, earned his place on Ray's list, not out of hate, but out of heartbreak. Then came the boy wonder, Justin Timberlake. To millions, he was the golden child. The breakout star from NSYNC, the face of a new era, and when his solo hit Crimea River dropped, the industry crowned him as the future of pop. But to Ray Charles, it was different, dangerously different. One day in 2002, inside a Los Angeles studio, a young employee pressed play. Justin's voice filled the speakers, smooth, polished, dripping with style. Everyone in the room nodded along, everyone except Ray. He listened quietly. He even tapped his cane to the beat. Then, halfway through the track, he reached forward and clicked it off. It's not bad, Ray said slowly, but it's not alive either. The room went silent. Not alive? What did he mean? Ray explained. Do you hear any blood in that voice? Any cigarette smoke? Any heartbreak? He shook his head. I don't. To Ray, Timberlake was more than just a young star. He was the symbol of a machine, a world where image mattered more than pain, where a perfect jawline and a marketing plan could manufacture soul in a boardroom. Ray had played through hunger, through rejection, through segregation. Every note he sang carried scars. But when he looked at Justin, he didn't see scars. He saw polish. A singing mannequin, Ray called him once. Handsome, marketable, but hollow. He didn't dislike Justin as a person. He wasn't angry at him. What he couldn't forgive was the system that held up someone so safe. While bearing the voices who sang with blood on their tongues, Ray's verdict was simple. He's not wrong, just not real. And that was enough to put Justin Timberlake on Ray Charles's unforgettable list. Then came Christina Aguilera. Barely 20, already a powerhouse. Her voice could shatter glass, soar above orchestras, stop an audience in its tracks. When she hit those notes, people swore she was the next Whitney, the second coming of Mariah. But Ray Charles didn't hear that. He heard something else, something missing. The first time he saw her was on a glowing television in the studio. A teenage girl, microphone clutched tight, holding a note so long you thought her throat might give out. The crowd roared. The cameras zoomed in, and Ray sighed. Not because she was bad, because she was too good. Later, during a rehearsal for a TV special, Christina finally stood face to face with the legend. Her eyes lit up. Her voice shook as she asked him, "What do you think of my singing?" Ray smiled, that tired kind of smile that hides more than it shows. "You've got pipes, girl," he said, "but what are you really trying to say with them?" That wasn't a compliment. That was a challenge. To Ray, music was never about proving how high you could go or how long you could hold a note. It was about revelation. It was confession. It was scars turned into sound. And when he listened to Christina, he didn't hear scars. He heard courtroom drama, a voice trying to prove pain, not live it. "She sings," Ray once muttered, "like she's convincing a jury she's been through hell." Christina had a rough childhood, abuse, turmoil, heartbreak. She had lived pain, but to Ray, pain doesn't need to be screamed. It doesn't need to be polished into vocal gymnastics. True pain is a whisper that cracks at the right moment, a pause that speaks louder than a high note, and that's what Ray never found in her music. Not silence, not space, not surrender. The world called her the voice of a generation, but to Ray, she was an echo of the voices before her. Mariah, Whitney, icons she was told to model, not surpass. He didn't resent her. He was saddened for her because she had everything: talent, fame, power, but hadn't yet found the one thing he believed mattered most: her own soul. Ray didn't hate Christina Aguilera. He just didn't believe her, and for him, that was worse. Barry Manilow, and then there was Barry Manilow, the hitmaker, the man behind love songs that sold out arenas and topped the charts, a voice polished like glass, every syllable smooth to perfection. Audiences adored him. He was safe. He was comforting. He was the soundtrack to candlelit dinners, not barroom brawls. But to Ray Charles, that was exactly the problem. The first time Ray heard Barry on the radio, it was early morning in Atlanta, coffee still warm in his hand. A silky ballad floated through the speakers. Perfect pitch, perfect tone, too perfect. Ray turned to his bandmate and shook his head. "He sounds like he's wrapped in plastic wrap," Ray said. "Touch it, it glides, but you don't feel a damn thing." That was Ray's deepest frustration. Music that asked for nothing. Music that never made you ache. Music designed not to move you, but to soothe you, like background wallpaper for the soul. He called it showroom music. Songs polished so clean they'd lost their dirt. And to Ray, the dirt was everything. When Ray lost his sight as a child, music became his eyes. The scratches on a cheap harmonica told him the world was still breathing. A church choir, slightly off pitch, felt more divine than any cathedral sermon, because imperfection was proof of life. Barry Manilow, though, to Ray, his songs were like perfume commercials. Pleasant pies glossy, forgettable. Once, a producer floated the idea of a duet. Two legends, side by side, voices blending into history. Ray didn't even think about it. He just shook his head. "He ain't dirty enough for me." It wasn't an insult to Barry as a man. It was a rejection of what he represented. Music without risk. Music without sweat. Music without the scars that made Ray Charles who he was. In his final notebook, Ray scrawled a line that said it all. Some folks sell albums, some sell truth, and some just sell polish. Barry Manilow? To Ray, he was polish personified, and that was enough to place him firmly on the list. And then came the wound that cut deeper than any song, not from a singer, not from a rival, but from a preacher. Billy Graham. In the 1960s, Graham was untouchable, the voice of America's conscience, a man millions trusted as the bridge between people and God. When he spoke, crowds leaned in as if God himself were whispering. And one day, from a Southern Baptist stage, Graham delivered a sermon that Ray Charles never forgot. The church is not a nightclub, he thundered. Sacred music belongs to God, not the devil's playground. He didn't say Ray's name. He didn't need to. The media filled in the blanks. The message was clear. Ray Charles, and every black artist fusing gospel with rhythm and blues, was dragging God's music through the mud. To the public, it was just another sermon. To Ray Charles, it was a dagger, because gospel wasn't just music to Ray, it was breath. It was survival. It was the only light he had when his childhood was covered in shadows, poverty, blindness, and the sting of segregation. As a boy in Greenville, he would touch the sides of the church organ, feeling the wood vibrate as the choir sang. That sound was God. That vibration was hope. It was proof that he belonged to something bigger than the pain surrounding him. So when Billy Graham declared that Ray's music was profane, it wasn't a critique. It was a condemnation of his very soul. Friends said Ray sat in silence for hours after hearing those words, hands resting on the piano keys, unmoving, as if asking himself, if even the church says my music is wrong, what part of me is still right? Later, he confided in Quincy Jones. If that man ever had to beg for supper with a piano, Ray said softly, he'd know music ain't about genre, it's about hunger, soul hunger. Ray didn't clap back publicly. He never attacked Graham in interviews. That wasn't his way. Instead, he answered the only way he knew how, with music. From that moment, Ray made gospel the heartbeat of everything he touched. Jazz, country, ballads, funk. Every genre became a prayer in disguise. Every performance, a sermon. Not to prove Billy Graham wrong, but to prove God was everywhere, even in a nightclub. He never forgave Graham, not because of the insult, but because Graham tried to stand between him and God, to tell him his prayer didn't count. That, to Ray, was unforgivable. And so Billy Graham's name joined the list, not as an enemy of music, but as a reminder of how even holy men can silence voices they don't understand. So what was this list really? Not hate, not jealousy. It was Ray Charles's last warning shot. A message about an industry that valued polish over pain, copies over originals, and voices without scars. To him, music wasn't about being perfect. It was about surviving and making the world feel that survival in every note. Ray Charles didn't just play music. He lived it, and that's why, to this day, his roar still echoes louder than any polished imitation.